Hello and welcome to the RSnake Show Demo Day. We are back with Trey Ford, and we have another good demo for you from Hypori. So, as per usual, we have 5 minutes of slides. After that, we use the gong, and the rest is for Q&A and demos. So why don't we just give it over to Jim? Jim.
Great, thanks, Robert. Trey. I'm going to share with you a presentation. This offers a little deep inspection. Are you seeing the screen?
Not yet.
All right. Let me just try it one more time. And now you should
There
be
we
seeing
go.
this.
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So I'll go through this really quickly. I know you're going to gong me at 5 if I go much further, but what I want to do is just introduce you to the problem that we solve at Hypori. So we're focused on mobile productivity, and one of the biggest challenges that folks run into is putting the "and" between these keywords you see in blue here. Is how do I actually provide a secure access method for my users while also ensuring their privacy, do it at a cost that's reasonable, have it be a convenient solution for all, and ultimately complies with any industry standards, regulations, and be in compliance. So that's the overall needle we are trying to thread with the Hypori solution. And so I'll just show you a quick depiction so you can see how the architecture is actually set up. And it's a fairly simple architecture, but ultimately what we're doing is we're running a virtual phone in the cloud and giving you the ability to access it through a client that runs on your smartphone, whether that would be an iPhone or an Android phone. And typically this is used for BYOD, but it could also be done with corporate or government issued devices as well. But in essence, a client that you could download from either the App Store or from the Play Store onto your own personal device, then gaining access to our back end over a secure MTLS tunnel using TCP IP. And you have the ability to securely communicate with this back end that is basically representing your business or your work phone. And in there, every app that you would typically use for work purposes, say on a physical device, you're actually using it from a virtual device. No data ever is transmitted down to your physical device, so there's no additional security edge risk at the edge device, and there's no information that could be stolen with a man-in-the-middle attack either. We're actually just sending down delta streaming pixels of emulated screens based on the telemetry you pass up from your phone, such as type and swipe and audio, video, etc. It all integrates pretty nicely for the ability to use your camera, to use your audio, and then all the sensory things that are typically on today's smartphones. So that's the pretty simple approach. To put it into perspective, sometimes it's best to look at the most common alternative. Many today are using either a mobile device management or mobile application management. Right? There's really kind of 3 options. For about a quarter of the companies out there, typically small ones, they do let their employees just download apps like Outlook, et cetera, onto their own phone and access it without any agent on the phone at all. That's not a very secure solution at all, but it doesn't really get into the privacy issue with the individual because the company's not monitoring their device. When you introduce a mobile device or a mobile application management on the device, you're now putting an agent on that phone. In essence, it's containerizing the apps that you're going to be running for a business, but it gives the company the ability to know everything that's going on that device, the ability to securely access it and wipe it remotely if they think it's in danger. And ultimately, it gives the company more insight into what an individual is doing outside of work than I think either the employee or really the employer would like. So that's one of our big differences, is that we give you all the security you're looking for, far more than you would get with MDM or MAM, but we also ensure the employee or contractor or third party's privacy at the same point, and you don't have to issue them a new phone. You don't have to put any agents on it. So there's no overall cost of management for this mobile access that you're looking for. So that ultimately is our story. So I'll stop there. I think I got well into your 5-minute gong.
You sure did. There's 4 minutes, so you're good to go. I don't know how fast that, maybe it was slightly less than 4 minutes because you were wrestling with that, but I don't think I've ever been sold so fast. That is very cool.
Very tight.
So can I ask questions right out of the box before we jump into the demo?
Sure.
So is this primarily or exclusively for enterprises, or do you allow this for downstream markets? Like who is this for exactly?
Yeah. So, sometimes you artificially constrain yourself so you're not hitting your entire total addressable market. So our subscription target market now has been the U.S. government with a focus on DoD, and now we're moving more into federal civilian, and then regulated industries such as healthcare and financial services.
Okay, that's the first bad thing I've heard so far, because this sounds like something that would be useful for all kinds of small businesses,
Yeah.
especially for like consultants or something where they have to have like 20 different things for people's, on their devices. Like I'm working with all these different companies. I want to be able to support them, but also I don't want all their shit on my phone. Like, can I allow them to have that shit, but on this Hypori instance?
Yeah. It's a great point. And so, as part of an extension of the federal government and primarily with the DoD, legislation has been in the works for a long time under CMMC 2.0, governs over the defense industrial base. Anyone who's bidding on contracts under the Pentagon or the DoD itself has an obligation to protect CUI. And one of the nice things about the Hypori solution, since there's no data ever on the device itself, they're out of scope for CMMCs. So they can allow their people to work on these contracts without any risk to government data ending up on an edge device that would be insecure, could be compromised. So we've collapsed the attack surface. So there is no way to expose yourself to data breaches or leakages on the mobile phone, which really there is no other real way to do it today. It's exposed in any way you look at it. Once the horse is out of the barn, it's out of the barn. And if the data's the horse and ultimately the phone that you're carrying around is the field that it's run around in, it's pretty easily exposed.
Value proposition makes sense, right? I totally understand the angle for CUI and not allowing for data proliferation. Like that makes a whole lot of sense. I can also appreciate targeting very large markets. I guess without a threat to damaging your average sales price or that sort of demographic TAM decision making. I think about a lot of smaller companies that are working towards FedRAMP, that are wanting to do business with the DoD. That are they going to not be able to use your platform? Is it principle for that, or is it a large like what's it take to get in and use this? Are you willing to go down market?
Yeah, great question. So we're willing to go down all kinds of markets, and FedRAMP is a great example of one that allows an easier buy-in. The company doesn't have to invest in a lot of infrastructure to load it up in their own data center. We can actually come in and they can start to buy it for small units of folks, the tens or hundreds of people, but small groupings of purchases for this at just a SaaS offering. So we are FedRAMP High in process today. We're actually Impact Level 5 accredited already, which is a superset of the FedRAMP High requirements, just a different governing body. So we offer both of those today in AWS GovCloud as a SaaS offering. We also offer our software, our cloud-based software, to run in your own private cloud. So if you've purchased and you're working, say, with AWS and you have your own private enclave, we'll install it in your environment, and via a decision-based matrix, a RACI matrix, we decide who manages what in your environment. And we still bring a little bit of the SaaS to you, but realizing that we're not all of our infrastructure as code isn't managing, rolls out of new cloud instances without getting approval from the person who writes the check for that infrastructure.
Okay, I got some questions about that. So when you say I can install it in my environment, how does that work with things like cell phones? Do I work with a third-party provider to hand off a cell phone number? Like how do you structure that? How does that all work?
So it really is think of it more of a voice over IP type of solution. So all they're really downloading is the client itself onto their own personal device. We send them out a QR code via email, or they can see it online through a browser, and add an account. And I'll show you this during the demo. Once they're done, you're connected over that MTLS connection, and we're managing a certificate on the device itself that gives you kind of that two-way handshake. From there, you're now accessing your virtual workspace. There's no phone number or anything else that's involved at this point in time. But it does introduce the idea that you could have a second phone number that's available only within your virtual phone. So
that's exactly where I was. That's where I was going with this, because I think that's the big problem is I have second factor auth tied to my personal phone as opposed to this device, which I think would be hugely beneficial if you could have a soft phone in your phone for all kinds of weird use cases, that just being one of them.
Yeah. And so yes, you could use your own phone number inside of your virtual workspace, but I think most people's inclination is to not do that, is to separate their personal from their work life and actually use a work-based phone. And so you can do that with third-party tools like, say, Google Voice, if you wanted to use that. We're also building a solution on top of this using the Twilio APIs, where you can issue a phone number or bring your own phone number if you'd like. For example, if you're an investment banker, your business phone is a pretty important thing to you. You want to keep that with you. That's how people know how to reach you. But you can also have a new one issued for talking and text within that secure environment. So it both is bring your own, as well as where we find gaps in the market, we can roll out a new capability for them. The reason why we attacked the text topic is a number of regulated industries, including the government, has some concerns over people using things like WhatsApp and Signal for communication. And short of an individual never deleting their messages and voluntarily surrendering their device, you might never have access to anything that happens over that private public key communication mechanism. Well, we have the ability to, within Hypori text, to store those messages off to the side so they could be audited. Certainly like a January 6th type of situation could have had better. The SEC just did, I think, $1.8 billion of fines to the financial services institutions who were letting people do communication on WhatsApp or Signal on their personal device with no ability to audit it. And certainly HIPAA is going to rear up its head here pretty soon, now that we're beyond the pandemic, about the violations of sharing PHI. So all of those are reasons we just saw a gap in the market. There really wasn't a heterogeneous client mechanism for also auditing text for future storage and use. And so we'll fill the gap with that as well.
And okay, maybe we should jump in the demo, because one thing I'd like to see is if I could have multiple Hypori instances, like how does that work? And just, these are all UI stuff.
You're going to get me there right away. I might have to hand it over to you at some point. But let me just share with you the demo, and it's going to fill up a portion of the screen because I'm using a AirDroidCast solution. But when I share, so I'm going to start with my phone in general. So this is my primary phone. This is what, if you picked up my phone, my physical phone, this is what my homepage would look like. If you go down to the lower piece, you see the Hypori icon here. Right, so that's the app that you would bring down from, in my situation, the App Store. I'm an iPhone user, so that's where I would go. If you're an Android user, you'd go to the Play Store. But I want to show you something before. I'm going to go into my demo box here, and I'm going to hit speed test. This is going to show you the speed that I'm getting accessing on my phone in my house, just so you get a sense for it now. So I'll go ahead and run this connection. It'll show you, I have pretty good bandwidth for operating from my home office here. I think most people would be reasonably pleased to see, over 250 or around 250 on download. And I think I get something similar on my upload as well. And I'll ask you to just kind of remember this as we move further into the demo, because I'm going to show you what it looks like when you're doing it from the Hypori virtual workspace as well. Again, same phone. So you can see I'm 250, 206, not bad, right? I think most people would be pretty pleased with that, with their mobile access from their Wi-Fi at home. But I'm gonna leave here, and I'm gonna go back to again down here, the Hypori client that I have down here, and you can see I have 5 different virtual phones that I can go to. Now this is something you can't do with MDM. You can only have MDM on your phone once. It's a one-trick pony. So if you, as you mentioned, a consultant, and you work for multiple companies that want you to be able to have access to their environment, you can't do it but for one of them. Otherwise, you need to have a different phone for each one of them in order to operate. It's just one of the key limitations. There really is no theoretical limit to how many we can have. And you'll see some of them, I have one going out to a CMMC environment, which is on GovCloud. I have one for a demo, our internal IT organization. I have one using Google's MDM solution, letting MDM manage my virtual workspace for me. But I'm gonna first show you. I'm gonna go into the demo account and just kind of give you a sense of what happens. So it's going to connect, and it's using biometrics locally to verify CAN, and it'll go in. And what you're seeing here is this kind of orange ring around my session, it's showing me that I'm at work. It's giving me a differentiation of where I am. And that color can be set so that if you have multiple of them, you can set different colors for them, say, oh, okay, here's where I am. It's just a good visual marker of where you are in the event that you have multiple. And again, I promised you I would show you kind of a speed test, so I'll just do it while I'm in here. But if I go in and do my speed test from within my virtual workspace, again, this is me. I've launched in. I'm connected from my client to my virtual workspace in the AWS commercial cloud, which I think this is a Virginia base, so it's US East 1. And if I go ahead and run my my connection and run my speeds here, you're going to see something that's quite a bit more astounding than what you were seeing when I was on it. So why am I getting
because that's in the data center, right?
That's right. I'm getting data center level speeds. And this is where I actually launched the apps as well to work. So my apps that are accessing backend systems are getting that kind of data center connectivity. It's not limited based on the bandwidth I have from my phone to a cell network or Wi-Fi. It's that kind of connection. So you get the most robust version of those apps when it comes in. So that just gives you an idea of how quick I can go. But if I want to get out of here, I just drag down and I can go and do a disconnect from here. And it'll take me back to my main page of where I wanted. So I'm going to pick my Hyporion account now and connect. Again, I'm going over my Wi-Fi to connect, checks my biometrics, which again, that's an optional setting. People can choose to do that or not. And now you're seeing the home page within my virtual workspace. Now, underneath this, mind you, is an Android operating system. But boy, this looks, if you're an Apple user, this looks more familiar. It's a fairly comfortable place. It's because we're using a launcher that sits on top that kind of gives that rounded edge and more of that view and font view that you're accustomed to if you're an iPhone user. Again, our goal is to make this feel like if you were doing this yesterday on your own phone, you come into Hypori, you can use us right away. There's no special magic. And I've been in the enterprise software world for 3 decades now, and I've never had a software solution that was so intuitive to use. Because if you knew how to use a phone, then you know how to use Hypori.
Now, I was gonna ask about that. What about swipe controls? Like typically on iPhone, you swipe up to start canceling or deleting apps. Like, how's that work?
It's gesture based. So with the fact that we're using this launcher on top, we're using a gesture setting. There's actually if you go into, you're actually opening up your settings. You actually have the ability to go down and establish under system whether you want to use gesture navigation. If you're more of an iPhone user, you'd use the gesture navigation. If you are more of an Android person, you might use the 3-button navigation. I haven't really been an Android user any part of my life, so I'm more accustomed with the gesture. And some of the new Android phones that are coming out, I think more of them are using the gesture over the 3-button navigation. Just depends on the vintage of time you've been in it. So, but anything, as you can see, it navigates just like a regular phone does. But I could basically, I can have as many of these as one. If I hold down on an icon, everything starts to rattle a little bit, so I can move things around. I can put things into folders. As you see, I have, I put a bunch of stuff into a Microsoft folder here for the apps there. I've also created, a combination of some work apps that I have for ADP and Exonian, Greenhouse, etc.
Well, so a quick question. Since this is Android, can I just write whatever random app I want, or do I need to go through an app store, or how's that work?
Since it is Android, you have a lot more leeway because you can sideload. And certainly that's how some bespoke apps for some of our customers get loaded. But you can also access it via Play Store and download it directly. And within Play Store, you can have apps be wide open, or you can create basically closed-in environments using Google Workspace, the UEM product they have that allows you to kind of control what you want users to take and not take.
Got it.
Yeah. So if you think like kind of any one of these, let's suppose, we have an audio channel. So I'll open up Spotify, thanks, not going to rate you. And you can just grab something. I'm sure the volume will come through here, but let's suppose I play Jump. Yeah. So the audio channel is just as clean as it would be if you're playing Spotify on your own phone. And again, if you got an incoming phone call on your physical phone, the OS of your physical phone dictates priorities. So it would say, okay, unless you had Do Not Disturb established, it's going to then intercept and turn off the audio channel to Hypori. and kick it back to the phone so you have it. So it works between those, not dissimilar to the way that your apps negotiate for who has supremacy and what gets the upper hand. Typically, phone calls are the highest level of priority, and there's various degrees beneath that. But we manage within that stack based on prioritization. The other thing, I'd mentioned the camera. So you can see in the lower right-hand corner, this is the camera icon. We open up the camera, so we're using the physical one. So I can take a picture of us right here.
Oh, I was going to wave.
Yeah, no, sorry, that's for posterity purposes. But if I go into my gallery here, I will only see pictures of us, and I'll see it in our little picture that we took here.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to go out to my phone, physical phone's photo area, I won't see it here at all. So
Right.
Nothing ever goes down to the phone. Even though I took a picture using the phone camera's capability, I never, ever had any data down on the device. Same thing with the audio, the mic. It's all being streamed up. There's only pixels and telemetry moving between the two. There's no data to be intercepted either with a man-in-the-middle attack, which would be mightily difficult with an MTLS setup. But more to the point, there's just nothing to take. And so in all the red teams we've had done from the DoD, I think we're upwards of 10 now, they keep coming back and saying it's the most secure mobile solution they've ever tested. And largely because
that makes sense because it's almost not a mobile solution.
Ultimately, it's when you don't like the answers you're getting to certain questions, one tactic is, well, then change the question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did at Hypori. People kept saying, well, how do I control and manage and secure the endpoint? And I think that the answer was, well, assume you can't. How can you still do it effectively? And so we're based on this premise of assume the network you're on and the phone that you're working on is compromised, or certainly could be. Could you still do this securely?
Mm-hmm.
And it was affectionately known as the naked man exercise. But ultimately, if someone shows up in a compromised country with just cash in their pocket, buys a phone on that market, and coordinates over that market, and they still need to be able to do command and control without any ability to do attribution and no data residue left on that device. So it was just a different problem set that we were trying to tackle. Whereas you keep playing the whack-a-mole of just put more security solutions on top of your physical phone, more agents, et cetera. Eventually you make it unusable and it's still not fully secure. And that's what we're finding. And that's why many customers are moving away from an MDM MAM-based model for BYOD and looking at Hypori as the alternative.
Yeah, I like this a lot because it doesn't really give a company access to anything I've got either. It's kind of bidirectional security.
That's right. And an example of this, one that really kind of cuts through the teeth of it, is the executive order that disallows TikTok on a phone that actually has CUI on it. You cannot do that with an MDM-based solution. You wouldn't be able to have access, say, to NIPRNet, as well as have TikTok on that same device. With Hypori, you can have TikTok on your personal side of your device, but then you're just using Hypori's client to launch into a NIPRNet-based environment to do your CUI or classified work on the back end. And there's no way where TikTok will have any ability to know what's going on because, again, there's no data on the device for it to surf through. And so just these little things distinguish it over and over again.
So you made a statement a moment ago, and I want to back into that. We made the assertion that the employer is not going to have access to my data in that environment. The question that I'm wanting to drive towards first is, what type of staffing investment do I need to manage this? Because we're going to have to build up images. We're going to be managing some level of infrastructure. We're also going to have to talk about how we're providing support to the users. Mm-hmm. In theory, support's going to have access to be able to see or interact with this instance somehow. How do you think about that? How do you broker that? Kind of talk me through that, because on some level, corporate has to be able to get access to some of this.
Yeah, for sure. So let's assume that we're talking about a traditional SaaS-based deployment, which is our most common way in which we deploy. Although, as I mentioned before, we offer a private installs. Private installs are going to be more onerous on you as a customer, almost by definition. But in a SaaS environment, it can be as little as we do all the work for you. Through the first layer you might pick on is just user management. You're just going to be adding and removing users.
Yep.
And that's all you're going to do. Then you can start to pick up more what we call the domain manager level responsibility. And here's where you start to get involved in picking and choosing what apps users are allowed to have, helping set up policies about whether they're allowed to do screenshots or not do screenshots with their device. Things like that orange rim you saw when I showed you opened up the demo account, setting up those kind of rules. So those are things they can do. But again, this is stuff you typically do kind of once, or certainly not very often, and then you just deploy it out. The thing that happens most with greatest volatility is going to be user management, adding and removing users. Now, when it comes to the support side, what we've also noticed is the noisiest time is typically that first day or two.
Yep, sure.
When people might run into a problem. And then after that, it dwindles down to maybe one ticket per person per core at most. So it goes quite a bit down. And customers, again, if they already have a fairly mature help desk and that's the way they want to run it, they may do the tier 1 and try to evolve into some tier 2 work. And then they coordinate it with our support center that picks it up from there. Certainly, if it's a break fix, it comes all the way and works its way back into my engineering group to do the tier 3 and the engineering break fix work to push it back out. So we do all the upgrades, all the maintenance, everything else.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about the container that lives in AWS or whatever. I'm not sure do you have a name for that? Is it the server? What do you call it?
The virtual workspace.
Okay, the virtual workspace. Can I also put like really tight controls in it? For instance, like it should only be able to contact this network over here, or it should not be able to access these very specific, known bad networks that we know about that people are trying to attack us on, or
for sure.
How can you show us what that interface looks like, or how you control it, or how does that work?
It would be something a little different. It's the admin console, but in general, let's say, suppose you're already using MDM or MAM today, and maybe using a VPN as well. You already have a lot of these controls in place to create these whitelist or blacklist around what you want users to do. Within our virtual workspace, if you want to restrict what websites they can go out to, as an example, you can establish a whitelist and say they're only allowed to go into these. And we would access that through a VPN that you've established it. I'm not trying to advertise anyone, but let's suppose you're using Zscaler. You can use Zscaler as your VPN, and we would route all the traffic that goes from our virtual workspace to your VPN to then make the decision as to whether that traffic can be routed out to the internet or not, whether they want to block it because it's on or off the whitelist. So all of that is set up how you would normally do it. We try to stay out of the business of doing things that are down to the individual customer level, because they're in far better position to manage and control those things like whitelist and blacklist. We just give them the ability to incorporate what they're already using today. If you're already using Zscaler, great. If you're already using Intune, great. If you're using Mobile Iron, great. We'll keep using that. But if you don't, we also provide those tools within our own embedded MDM Lite capability, if you will. We build various policies within our solution that either says, I abrogate this over to something else, or we take responsibility for those limitations. And when we can't support it, but a third party does, then we suggest, hey, maybe you should use Zscaler for this example. Now, in an IL5 scenario, it's preordained. We have to send everything over to BCAP as an example. So it's going to make those decisions on our behalf. So it's already managing traffic, and it's a very severe. It's very much a whitelist based model. Mm-hmm. Other areas, like in pure commercial, we just manage a blacklist in our Palo Alto setup, and that's really just to avoid going to like the dark web and adult sites and gambling and stuff like that you would naturally want to discourage or eliminate from a work environment.
Interesting. So you're doing it mostly at the network level. You're not doing. It's not the admin console doesn't have specific rules I put in place. Like for instance, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, let's say there's a set known of good apps or set known of bad apps. Mm-hmm. Like what sort of controls? What does the admin have the ability to do and tweak, I guess?
So let's talk about the apps for a second. So at the hardest core version, this typically happens when we go to like a CSFC type of site. So something is classified. We deploy apps via built-in template, and so we take the APKs and we deploy them as a monolithic, really a Cartesian product that says, here's everything right here. This whole thing, this unit works together. and we update it about every 4 to 6 weeks based on APK's versioning to do it. So that's a hard user can't add anything more to it. It's a lockdown environment. Beyond that, and maybe at the most wide open, somebody might just say, hey, just put Play Store on it and let me have as much fun as I want without restrictions. Those are kind of the two widest parameters. Between that, there are scenarios where the customer brings their own mobile device or mobile application management technology that they're using for, say, currently for their own company provided phones, but also for desktops and laptops, et cetera. It's already a mature policy. They just now want to use that to then manage our virtual phones instead of physical phones. And it works just the same. Mm-hmm. They've already established the policy of what apps somebody is supposed to get and what optional apps they can get, how often they have to be updated. They'll have views on the OS version that needs to be on there. And of course, with Hypori, you don't worry about it because we take care of all the OS management ourselves. So you don't have to worry about all your end users updating to the most recent patch of Android or iOS in time. And we also make sure the apps themselves get updated and they don't end up on an older version of the app. Apps can be built if you're building
how does that work in like classified environments? Do they have to update themselves or?
They typically work with us. It depends on whether they want their folks to get trained to do that or they just want us to do it. We run a managed services business to complement it and support if they don't want to put the people towards it. It's a fairly lightweight activity. It happens about we typically do it at the time we do our upgrades. And we do upgrades about once a month, primarily for vulnerability stuff. We have certainly Red Hat and stuff like that we have to do pretty much monthly vulnerability scans. And if we find any highs, criticals, mediums, we adjust them and then we do a release. And that happens once a month. At that same kind of interval, we would also update the APKs that are in the templates to minimize any potential maintenance downtime.
Got it. Can we see the admin console, or is that verboten?
It would take me just a few minutes if we want to shoot the breeze while I'm just kind of adjusting over to it.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's going to have some personal information in it because it's not a demo, but I'll show you the one that's for Hypori insiders.
Okay.
So let me stop sharing here and just verify that I can get it up and running really quickly.
While you're doing that, let me talk through some of the use cases I've already heard that I think might be good to kind of poke at. So on the very, very down market, I could see a guy like me going, hey, I just want to be more private. Like, let's get this Twilio thing up and running. Let's have all these apps and it all beaconing from an environment as opposed to my house or when I'm out on the road. I'd be kind of forced in a situation where I have to use somebody's Wi-Fi. I'm actually okay doing that as long as I'm not doing anything like unencrypted over it. Most things are encrypted these days, but I'd rather just have things kind of double wrapped whenever possible, or at minimum, if it's going to be encrypted, I'd rather it just be like a really robust encryption, not something that can be downgraded easily, and that's sort of a big kind of crapshoot with modern phones. Mm-hmm. It seems like this solves a lot of those problems on the very low end market. And the very high end market, I can see almost any bank or HIPAA compliant. There's just like all these doctors, let's say in some office, are like, I don't want another phone. I don't want your MDM on my phone. Like, I just don't trust you. You know, like that IT guy who lives in the office, like, there's a lot of insiders. Like, I've met some of these guys that are, they're trustworthy, sort of, but you never know. Like, they have a bad weekend at the craps table, and like things could change very rapidly. Like, I'd rather not have to rely on them at all for my personal stuff. Go ahead and manage the company, like whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, if you want to hack the company, that's the company's problem, but you shouldn't be able to hack me and my family and all these other side projects I've got, like the basketball team I manage or whatever random side projects I've got.
Yeah. So you're hitting on what I think really is one of our key distinguishing features, which is the topic of privacy. So you have a couple of options here as, say, the employee. You can either demand that the company provide you a second phone, and you only do business on that phone, and therefore there is no ability for the business to track you when you're doing your personal stuff. Or you use a solution like Hypori, which has no cross-pollination between what you do in your personal life and what you do in your physical. as soon as you welcome MDM or MAM, you're basically commingling that. They're sharing the same storage device on your phone with data from work and from your personal life. Apps are living in the same space. And so everything that they may want to know about your phone or any access, they basically are in a rooted agent-based model there, and they have the ability to see what's going on and the ability to remotely wipe it. And this opens up the business to exposure as well. There's been lawsuits that have been issued where a company aggressively wiped a former employee's phone, removing pictures that included, the last pictures this woman had of her grandmother before she passed. It went to court, big settlement came out of it. And that's a very personal thing that hurt them, but it just shows you there's so much stuff that could happen in that scenario. And a company could then find, if they're looking at you, they may become aware of something you're doing that they really wish they hadn't as well. And now do they have an obligation to report it? Well, geez, they shouldn't have known it in the first place. So it puts them in a very awkward situation. I can try to give you the admin console demo really quickly, if you'd like. So this is what we call the admin console, and it's really here to focus on user management. So up in the upper right-hand column is where you get a lot of the action. So all these are little API requests that you can have, from starting and stopping and pausing the device, rebooting it, the allocation, deallocation. So this is really device life cycle stuff. And when we talk about the device, we're talking about your virtual workspace, your virtual device that's running. You also have the ability to email somebody an OTP or even generate an OTP for them. And as I mentioned before, this is a QR code that makes it super easy to add a new account without any assistance from anyone. So it's anyone who's ever been to a restaurant or anytime they've tried to bring up a digital item at all from a QR code, they'd be very familiar with this approach. So we have all these abilities behind the scenes. So if I look at myself here and I go down and find my own application, let me just sort so I can find myself really quickly. Where am I? There I am. So you can see that I have a couple of accounts in here, and the one that I'm using, what I was demoing for you, was this that's my Hyporian admin account. And then I can go to the next page, it looks like, and then you can see another account that I have that's active. This is the one that I was demonstrating. And so I can do a number of different things from this. I could select this item here, and then I could go up and choose an action of what I want to do. If I needed to reboot the device because if someone called me in and said, hey, I'm stuck, something's not working, they could reboot it from here. I can stop it. I can deallocate it. If I see they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, like maybe it's an iOS user that's trying to do screen shots, and that's a policy violation, I can then come in and deallocate their device. I can set that up to happen automatically, or I could do that manually.
Excellent. So what are some of those policies you can turn on and off? Like that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of flexibility.
Well, there's policies and there's logging, like drilling into device activity and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So on the policy side, let me just try to navigate back to the window where I can see you guys. So the policies are built into two different areas for us. One we call the virtual device policy, and that's closer to MDM policy management. And then we have the client policy, and the client policy manages how the client application actually works with the back end. And it's instructions that when you initially connect and every subsequent time you connect, it downloads those instructions and makes sure that they're being followed. So for example, if it says you have to have TOTP as a second factor for authentication, it enforces that. It actually tells you if you need to actually use biometric or a PIN underneath it as well. So it limits and says what the client needs to do in order to connect with you on the back end. And so those are very uniquely Hypori-based policies. On the virtual device, it's much more the traditional MDM level controls that you've probably come to know and probably not love, but nevertheless that are there, that manage really what they can go do and act. What applications can they use? What access patterns can they go to other scenarios? What things can be stored in the key store in terms of like for single sign-on and other credentials. It gives you a whole cadre of controls within the virtual workspace, but it doesn't have to be ours. This is where we can hand it over to say, well, listen, if you're using Intune, we'll just put company portal inside your virtual workspace, and that'll manage your conditional access policies as already defined by your business.
So this is interesting. So this is interesting. So I actually don't need an NDM with your product. It comes baked in.
You don't.
Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of.
But if you have it and you want a single pane of glass of all of your endpoints, including our virtual endpoints, because that's, it's just easier for you to have a single pane of glass, then we certainly participate nicely in that world.
Interesting. So well, okay, but what about the other way around? Where about somebody doesn't want to use Hypori for some reason? I can't imagine why that would be the case, but could you use your MDM instead of somebody else's MDM?
No, we're not a standalone MDM. It's okay. Embedded inside of us only for our purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could see why there might be a scenario where someone's like, this really is my device. For whatever reason, I can't install some other agent on it or whatever, but I think that's much less likely. I think the more likely thing is there's a whole bunch of people, for whatever reason, have legacy something or other, and you have to play nice with some existing MDM software. On it. Yeah, or it's like widely deployed. It would take a long time to unwind it, and they might do it next quarter or next year or 3 years later after their contract expires, but they're not going to switch now.
Sure. Well, let's be honest. It's a lot easier to sell and buy software when somebody isn't threatened because of it.
Right. Yeah.
That's a really good statement.
I can read between the lines on that one. Okay, so what is your roadmap in terms of getting that Twilio thing? Because that seems like a killer app once you have that. Because then I have really a ton of. I can see this being really useful for like investigators, for instance, like DFIR types who really need to drill in and talk to people, and they don't really want their personal information attached to it. Like that could be crazy useful.
Yeah. Or that massive incident response scenarios where like literally your corporate infrastructure is totally compromised, so you need to stand up an entire side channel.
Or sales, just get all the sales people like using this thing instead of their personal devices, so they don't walk out the door with all their contacts. I mean, there's tons of use cases for this.
Yeah. There's several products out there. Many of them they kind of are niche-y in their own little area. Like Movius has some popularity in banking. But popularity may not be the best use. Let's just say it has some adoption, but it's not well regarded by the users. And so that certainly is an area. And I don't think there's a really great standard inside of the healthcare industry, but they're looking for one. So we're rolling this product out, Hypori Text, Hypori Talk, at the beginning of next year. We're in alpha stages now, playing with it. And we haven't decided exactly how we'll introduce it. Whether it'll probably come at a fee, but it'll be a nominal fee for people to use. It'll be an option. Not everybody's going to need it. And again, you can bring your own. Like you probably sell Teams on my environment. Well, that works if everybody in the entire company is using Teams. But as soon as you want to communicate with people outside your company, demanding that they download Teams to do it is kind of a non-starter for a lot of folks. They want to use the messaging platform they want to use. Yep. And so because we can say, hey, you'll use the Hypori text interface, but over SMS and maybe eventually RCS, you'll be able to communicate with people regardless of the user interface they're working with, whether they want to use Signal or iMessage or Android Message or whatever they can. We still have the ability to then store that entire conversation for the purposes of that business if they're ever under an audit and they need to have proof of the conversation that occurred. So that'll come out at the beginning of next year. Another big one that's probably worth putting on the table is one where our customers are driving us to, which is, okay, great. We love this for mobile and tablets. What about desktop and laptop? And so, again, it's still the same back end. It's just the client that is different. And the wonderful thing that's happening serendipitously for us is there's convergence occurring at the chip architecture level across the different platforms. ARM is starting to find its way onto desktops and laptops. Mac OS and iOS are converging as well on the M2, M3 silicon chip as well. So we're seeing convergence, and the apps themselves will become adaptable based on what platform are you using? Are you using a phone or are you using a desktop? And it'll appreciate the different sensors, whether it's an external keyboard and a mouse, or an integrated phone with touch type and swipe. So we're probably going to be rolling out a desktop-based solution next summer that will run on top of basically the same kernel of code that we have, but appreciate the fact that Windows and Mac OS are a little bit different, and certainly the resolution that you're working with is quite a bit different. One that's deep in the weeds a little bit, but worth bringing up is we currently use a shared infrastructure when we go out into the cloud. So we're running these virtual workspaces with a combination of EC2 based compute, memory, and compute, and they're running on larger pieces of technology, .metal based boxes with Red Hat. Starting next spring, we're going to be rolling this out directly on Android on individual cloud instances. So you'll basically be running on your own cloud instance, and it'll give it a lot of portability and speed, and constantly, even if you haven't been using it for days, you still will be able to boot back up in like 7 seconds, as opposed to having your phone turned off and it's like a full boot up. And so just the user experience goes up dramatically with that as well.
You kind of already get the desktop experience today with iPhone mirroring. So that right now you could have that piece.
And Samsung Dex, people use Samsung Dex on occasion with it. People have done some really clever stuff, as you can imagine, with us, and they've got it running on like an Amazon Fire.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We see it use anything that's an Android device. You can kind of figure out how to work it out, but that's not our supported go-to-market, but it can work.
So one question I have about that future implementation is, let's say I've got a cell phone, but I have a inbound call coming from a Hypori instance. Do you have some sort of messaging bus or something to say, hey, you should turn on this Hypori instance because someone's trying to reach you on this? Or how does that work?
Yeah, thank you. Great question, because I skipped over. Actually, I turned it off because it can be distracting during a demo, but we offer notifications, and they go through Firebase or APNS. So you get them the same way you've always got them. So if you have an incoming call, we'll send you a notification instantly. And if you click on it, it'll connect you to your Hypori client and take you directly to that phone call and make the connection. So as long as your caller isn't so impatient they won't wait for 8 seconds, which is basically 2 rings of a phone, then you'll get connected with them even if you weren't using your phone at that time.
Okay, cool. Any other roadmap items of importance that we should cover?
Global roaming is something that we're working on as well. So the ability to say, based on when you try to connect to us, we decide which back end we should connect you with to get the best performance. Because we try as we might, we haven't figured a way to defeat physics. So light speed is still our limitation.
I bet Akamai Sure Route might be able to help with that one.
That's the kind of thing that we're looking at. With AWS, they have the global accelerator, which achieves a lot of the same.
Yep.
We do our best not to ever just move the back end because of data privacy laws change by country to country. But the really interesting thing, and I'd love you guys' feedback on this, is under things like GDPR, when you have a phone in Europe and you actually work with your business data on your phone, it's actually on your data, the data is on your phone, and you get on a plane with that phone and you go to the US, have you violated a privacy law? Because you've basically taken a server and put it on a plane, and
I think yes.
I don't think anyone's enforcing that, but
I think yes.
You don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so a question I ask everybody, and it's kind of coming up on the end here, so this is a good one, is there anything about Hypori that you either have warrantied or think is so good that it could be warrantied, like people could get their money back because this thing, part of it is rock solid?
Well, there's 2 different ways to answer that question. So from a confidence of the technology that it works as expected and performed, absolutely. With accounting like ASC 606, it makes it a little harder to do stuff like that because of the way that we recognize revenue. So you'd end up in a fair amount of restating where you'd have to have holdback provisions that could be awkward. But in terms of running the business confidently under that question, I'd feel quite comfortable that yes, this thing works as advertised and in some of the most strenuous ways possible. Getting this thing up and running in government networks is a whole nother kettle of fish than it is to just get it up and running for commercial. And we've successfully done it. We've kind of done the opposite of what typically software companies do, which is have success in the commercial markets and then try to break into government. We started in government and now we're breaking out into commercial. So I think we had to tackle those really hard technical problems early on with a lot of security features that are oftentimes, late stage improvements. And so we did it by design as opposed to as an afterthought, which means we were able to not sacrifice user experience while we layered in security measures.
Well, I, for one, am very excited to see what this thing looks like when I can actually take phone calls on it. That's going to be a very, very cool feature, and I think you're going to get a lot of customers on that feature right there, just that one alone. And so, congratulations! This is a cool demo.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah. So, where do people reach you and your company?
So they can find us at hypori.com. I think the spelling has been put in here several times, so I won't belabor that point. And they can reach me personally at jim.cushman@hypori.com. And they can certainly find us all out on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, Jim, great demo. Thanks for coming on. I'm really looking forward to what's coming up next.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Bye,
Take
guys.
care.